Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to our supplemental video in Introduction to Project Management. So this time we are now in the week 8 or lesson 8 of your of our discussion in Introduction to Project Management. And today's topic we will be discussing about the stakeholder management. But before I proceed to my formal discussion, may I just remind, especially for those students who are not yet done taking their prelim examinations, to please settle your account and take your prelim examinations para makapag-proceed na kayo sa lesson 7 and 8 ninyo. So, konti pa lang yung mga kumukuha ng hard copy ng kanilang mga module kasi nga may mga student pa na ah, hindi pa nakapag-take ng prelim exam. So, it means that they are not yet complete with their prelim requirements. So, from week 1 to 5. So, kailangan for those student pala na hindi pa nakapag-complete ng kanilang requirements from week 1 to 5, you have to complete those requirements before you take your prelim examination or before I will allow you to take your prelim examinations. Okay? So yan. Pakiusap ko lang na wag nating hayaan na matabunan tayo ng requirements. So kailangan sundin natin yung mga deadline dates ng mga requirements para sa ganun ay hindi po tayo mahirapan na mag-cope up doon sa requirements. Okay? So yan. And as I said, always that I am giving plus extra points for those students who will submit the requirements 2 days before the deadline date or before the submission. Okay, so I am giving a bonus points, okay, sa mga student na maagang nagsasubmit ng kanilang mga requirements. And next is next reminder is every time you watch or listen to our supplemental video, make sure to have with you the printed module. So that would serve as your guide during or while you are listening or watching to our supplemental video. And for those students who are newly enrolled, please approach me so that ma-add ko kayo dun sa group chat natin. So it is very important na ma-add kayo dun sa group chat natin kasi dun ako nagdi-disseminate ng announcement or mga announcement regarding your module, regarding your subject. Okay? So yan. And doon din ako nagsisend ng mga link ng mga supplemental videos or recorded videos. So importante na ma-add kayo doon or member kayo doon sa group chat natin kasi doon na lahat yung mga link or na-upload ko na lahat yung mga link ng mga supplemental video doon. So, remind ko lang na uh, itong ginagawa namin which is the supplemental video or recorded a lesson discussion to your module is very important. So, if you have time guys or if you are not that busy, please watch or listen to our supplemental video. So, gawin nyo sana yung part ninyo kasi we're also doing our part para matulungan kayo to understand better yung printed module or yung module or lesson na meron sa inyo. So, it really, this is very helpful talaga guys, itong mga supplemental videos na ito. So, panoorin nyo sana kasi yun nga, hindi lang naman to basta-basta. So, doon din naman yung effort namin. So, sana panoorin ninyo para naman hindi masayang yung effort namin. So, we're doing this one for us uh, uh, to help you, 'di ba? Para mas maintindihan ninyo yung module or the lesson. Okay? Okay, so we also created a Google Classroom, especially for those our distance learner. So for our distance learner who are not able to come in school to to submit your requirements, is you may upload your requirements doon sa Google Classroom natin. So make sure na if you will going to upload or pass your requirements through image, is please make sure na clear yung picture or yung pag-capture nyo ng activity ninyo or answer ninyo or nababasa namin para sa ganun ay maintindihan din namin. Okay? So make sure na good quality yung mga sinesend ninyo na mga picture para sa ganun ay hindi naman kami mahirapan. And you may download the soft copy of the module in the Google Classroom. So andun na lahat, uploaded na po lahat yung mga requirements and even the lesson discussion dun sa Google Classroom natin. Okay, and for those students who are not yet enrolled or naka-in dun sa Google Classroom natin is you may ask me for our Google Classroom code or the classroom code, okay? Or kung gusto nyo, meron akong sinend na link dun sa may group chat natin, hanapin nyo na lang doon. Okay, so yan. So again, welcome to our supplemental video in Introduction to Project Management. So today's learning objectives. So at the end of the lesson, you will be able to define what is stakeholder management, discuss the importance of top management, commitment, and you will be able to explain the globalization, sourcing, and virtual terms in IT project management. So those are our learning objectives for today's topic. Okay, so to start with is okay, so start with is yun. So we have here the stakeholder management. So we have the project management. So ano nga ba or sino nga ba tong project management na ito? So when we say project management, they are the one who are responsible for the end-to-end management of their project. So including yung managing the performance and of course yung expectation ng individuals who may be outside their direct control. Pero who have a vested interest doon sa may project. So those are our project management or managers, I mean. Okay? So yon. And we have also here the stakeholders. So when we say stakeholders, so is anyone who has an interest in a project will be affected by its deliverable or outputs. Okay? So yun yung stakeholders. So they are the one who are interested doon sa may project na ginagawa ni project manager. Okay? So for example, so let's say sana na ikaw ay isang project manager for a project. So that will enable a company to accept yung online sales. So orders via their website. So yung stakeholder for this project are likely to be yung pinaka-head ng sales. So who is likely to be the project sponsor sana. So yung sales managers representing the internal end user group. So, store or yung warehouse manager representing yung internal end user group doon sa supply chain side. So, an IT manager who will provide system solutions for your project. So, yung group of customers who will represent the external end groups. Okay? So, that is an example. Okay? So yun, so why is stakeholder management is important? So sa tingin nyo, bakit kaya importante ang stakeholder management? Ha? Okay, so it's very important guys, especially pagka you are developing a project. So by their very nature, lahat ng mga project which involve yung sort of change. So whether it's the implementation of yung bagong system, so, the rollout of the new business process or yung paglo-launch ng new product. So, there is always some kind of change delivered by a project. Okay? So, yun, implementing change can be very challenging kasi nga, it requires a transforming. So, kung paano yung tao na mag-work or kung paano yung mga tao na mag-deliver ng project. Okay? So, yan. So, karamihan sa mga tao is naturally resistant to change or yung mabilis magbago or magbago ng product or magbago ng strategy, especially pag alam na nila na medyo hindi naging successful yung strategy nila or yung product nila. Okay? So which can jeopardize yung success of your project. So pagka yung stakeholder is nireject niya what your project is delivering or are uncooperative and unsupportive when it comes to doing the project, uh, doing the work of the project. So there can be a what you call detrimental effect. Okay? So one way of minimizing this resistance is kailangan ma-engage ka doon sa project stakeholders from the outset and get their commitment para masuportaan yung project mo. Okay? So yan. So kaya nga dapat importante yung stakeholder management. So ganyan kahalaga yung stakeholder management. Next is stakeholders. So ano nga ba itong mga stakeholders na ito? Or sino nga ba itong mga stakeholders na ito? Okay, so when we say stakeholder, guys, yung mga stakeholders is anybody who has a stake in the project. So yung mga stakeholder may be an individual or pwedeng individual yung stakeholder natin, pwede rin siyang group or pwede rin siyang organization who may affect or may or be affected by or yung perceived to be affected by a decision, activity or even in the outcome of the project. Okay? So further, so yung nature ng impact, the nature of the impact can be positive or pwede rin siyang negative. Okay, so thus giving rise to the notion na positive or negative stakeholders. So irrespective of whether a holder is a positive or a negative, so it is very important na ma-engage ka pa rin doon sa mga stakeholders para makuha nyo or makuha mo yung loob or to get them involved doon sa project na dinedevelop mo. So this can make yung critical differences to success or failure doon sa may project. So yung single na disgruntled stakeholders can bring the entire project to its knees. So whereas an actively engaged and influential stakeholder can have the opposite effect. Okay? So yan. So meron din tayong mga how do you call that one? There are several examples ng mga stakeholders natin. Okay? So, first is yung, how do you call that one? Yung project managers themselves are important stakeholders. So, yun. Yung mga project managers is, yun, kino-consider na din nila na isa sila sa mga stakeholders or important stakeholders. Okay? So, next is the project team members represent stakeholders in the project. So, as a team or project teams is yun, represent din nila yung stakeholders in the project. Okay, kasi nga as a team is pwede rin kasi na kunin mo yung idea mo ng ibang teams mo kung ano ba yung gagawin, kung okay ba or kung okay na ba yung project na dine-develop mo, kung may mga mali, kung may mga kulang, so pwede. So it pwedeng mag-serve sila as stakeholders kasi 'di ba alam naman natin na yung mga stakeholders, so they are the one to review or approve yung project sana or kung gusto ba nila or naging okay ba. So pwede rin yan na mag-act yung mga team members mo as a stakeholders. Next is the senior management of the organization which is working on the project. So has a stake in the project. So yung mga senior management of the organization. Okay, so next is we have the sponsor. So the sponsor. So example, person or entity that provides the money and resources for the project and essentially champions the project. So it's an important stakeholder. Okay, so next is we have the customer. So which may be different from the sponsor. So it's a stakeholder as well. So for instance, so karamihan sa mga project in social sector, so yung sponsor, yung mga sponsor natin is maybe the government or yung development agency. So whereas yung mga customers natin would be the people who actually benefit from it. Okay? So yan. So next is we have the end user. Yeah, tama ba ako? Yeah, so we have the end user. Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, end user. So which may be different from the customers or the sponsors. So our stakeholders too. So yung mga end user din is sila din ay pwede rin pwede rin na sila ay isang stakeholders. Okay? Okay, so next is we have the endeavors. So endeavors or suppliers who provide goods or services to the group are important stakeholders. So yun, mga vendors which is nagsusupply din or nagpro-provide ng goods or services doon sa mga project natin. So they are also considered as or they are also important stakeholders, especially yung mga materials na gagamitin mo, yung mga anong kailangan mo mga equipments, mga tools na gagamitin mo which is vendors or suppliers provide is also important stakeholders. Okay, so next is people whose lives may be impacted by the output of the project. So are also stakeholders. So yung mga tao na nagkakaroon ng impact dun sa project na dinevelop mo, so they are also considered as a stakeholders. So for example, sana yung mga highway project na daw. So is example dito is yung mga highway projects natin which is requires yung possession of the privately owned land. So yung mga people whose land is being taken away are the stakeholders. Yung mga tao na kunwari sa mga highway, sa mga road is yung nadama yung mga private land nila is yung mga tao na owner ng land na yon is they are also considered as a stakeholders. So meron mga nangyayari yan lalo ngayong road widening, 'di ba? So may mga talagang natatamaan or naapektuhan yung or affected yung mga private land nila tapos wala silang magagawa. So yung mga uh, owner ng private land na yon which is affected by the road widening is also stakeholders. Okay? So yan. So next is if the construction of a dam or water reservoir benefits the downstream farming communities, they are the stakeholders here. So for example, yung mga irrigation, yan, 'di ba? Yung mga irrigations, yung mga dam or yung mga water reservoirs natin which is nagbe-benefits sa mga farm communities natin, especially sa mga farmers, they are also a stakeholders. Okay? So, yan. So, imagine, no? So, pwedeng, hindi lang naman pala, ang dami palang pwedeng maging stakeholders. So, next is you have competitors who provide alternative goods or services are stakeholders too. O, yung mga competitors mo, kunwari, may sa isang business mo, or yung kunwari, Lazada online shopping, 'di ba? Or so 'di ba ang pinaka competitor niya is you have the Shopee, 'di ba? So yan. So they are also yung competitors niya is also considered as stakeholders who provide yung alternative goods or yung mga services too. So they are also considered as stakeholders. Next is sometimes, environmentals or other social groups may become stakeholders. So, yan. So, minsan yung mga environmentalist natin or yung mga social group natin is pwede rin silang maging stakeholders natin. Yung what do you mean by environmentalist? Sila yung mga nagtatrabaho, nagre-research about environment or sila yung nagtatrabaho yung mga nagtatrabaho na from the Department of Agriculture. So yan, mga environmentalist yung mga yan. So they are also considered as stakeholders. Okay, so next is the government. So the government or political leadership may become stakeholders for project in the public domain. So yan, yung mga government or mga political leadership natin, especially pag mga mga politicians natin which is nagde-develop sila ng mga projects nila, kung ano nung projects, mga road, mga bridge, mga infrastructures, yan, mga yan. Or yung mga government agencies natin, yung mga Department of Highways na nagde-develop ng road or nagke-create ng projects nila is they are also considered as our stakeholders. Okay? So, yan. So, yan. So it is sufficient to state that there could a potential be hundreds of stakeholders for a large project. Okay, 'di ba? So it is in the interest doon sa mga project managers at saka yung project team natin is clearly identify lahat ng mga kagaya ng stakeholders up front and then actively manage them throughout the project. Okay, so yan. So next is, so as you can see dyan sa my figure natin, so yan. So we have the internal stakeholders and you have the external stakeholders. So an example of, for example, in a company sana, we have the internal stakeholders and you have the external stakeholders. So in the internal stakeholders, you have the employees, you have the managers, and you have the owners of the company. And for the external naman is you have yung mga suppliers, yung mga nagsusupply doon sa may ah, company ninyo, kung ano yung mga product na binibenta ninyo. For example, yung mga society, mga society, sila yung mga bumibili ng project ninyo, o yan. And government, yan. And if mga creditors, man. And then you have the shareholders and yung mga customers. Yan. So those are an example of an external stakeholders sa company, and yon. So, employees and managers and owners naman for the internal stakeholders. Okay? So, yan. So, next is we have the classification models for stakeholder analysis. So, hindi lahat ng mga stakeholder is meron the same amount of influence or power over dun sa may project. So, therefore, yung way to manage each stakeholders needs is to be calibrated, na which is based doon sa proper classification of the stakeholders. So this is the role of the classification model. So yan. So you can come up with a grid that maps the power of the stakeholders. So the interest they have, and even the influence they may have, or even the impact that they can have on the project through doon sa power or interest. So yung power or interest, or yung impact, yung impact grids, yan. So it can be represented by mapping stakeholders to a power or yung interest grid natin. So based doon sa various combination ng power levels and interest levels, so yung grid can be divided into four quadrants. So as you can see dyan sa figure natin, so we have four quadrants there. Okay, so dun sa, we have top right quadrant, and you have the bottom right quadrant, and then you have the top left quadrant, and you have the left bottom quadrant. Okay, so let's start with the how do you call that one? So the top uh the top right quadrant. So yung kulay pink. Ayan, tama. Top. Okay, so tong top right quadrants na ito yung mga the stakeholders on the top right quadrant. So with high power and high interest. So kailangan nilang or they need to be managed closely. So you have to monitor their involvement and engagement very closely. So for example is here. So meet their needs. So engage and consult on interest area, and try to increase level of interest and aim to move into the right box. So yan. Next is we have bottom right quadrant. So yung bottom right quadrant natin, so yung may stakeholders on the bottom right quadrant with high interest but low power. Okay, so yan. So with high interest but low power, so kailangan I need to keep in the loop. So here, show consideration. So make use of interest through yung involvement in low risk areas, and keep informed and consult on the interest area and potential supporter, so goodwill ambassador. So you should share information with them and keep them regularly informed, or lagi nyo silang ini-inform dapat. Okay, itong bottom right quadrant, which is show consideration then. So we have also top left quadrant. So the stakeholders on the top left quadrant, so meron silang mga high power pero low interest sila. So can be managed by keeping them happy. So for example, by making sure that yung interest nila and yung mga opinions nila are taken into consideration, or kino-consider mo rin yung mga yung mga opinions nila or yung mga gusto nila. Okay? So yan. So parang show consideration And yan, for the least important, you have list via general communications, newsletters, website, mails that aim to move into the right and yan. Next is for the last quadrant is you have the left bottom quadrant. So yung mga stakeholders on the left bottom quadrant with low power and low interest, so maybe managed less actively by simply monitoring how things are going with them. Okay? So yan. So yung the Salience model, dinidescribe niya yung classes ng stakeholders based doon sa power nila or yung ability to impose their will. So urgency, kailangan nila ng immediate attention, and legitimacy is yun, appropriateness of their involvement level. So this is very useful framework to para mag-guide yung mga stakeholders management strategy doon sa my project. So yan, so yung pag-practice ng creating power grids for the business scenarios, so also this will also help yung pag-intindi natin dun sa level of engagement na kailangan ng mga project managers para ma-maintain yung various stakeholders. Okay? So yan. So next slide is we have the stakeholder skills. So yan. Okay, so yung stakeholder skills natin, so stakeholder management is both art and science. So since it involves with dealing people, and people are inherently non-linear and unpredictable. So there is no size that fits all strategies or tools that will work while managing them. So however, yung project managers natin may use pwede siyang gumamit ng mga few traits and techniques habang minamanage niya yung or while managing stakeholders. So which are classified as yung interpersonal natin and managerial skills natin. So ito 'yon. So when you say interpersonal skills, so ano ang ibig sabihin nito? So kailangan yung mga project manager is kailangan nilang mag-possess ng good interpersonal skills. So, yan yung kailangan mag-invest ka ng time and energy para ma-build yung trust nila sa'yo. Okay, so, of course, this involves yung mga multiple things such as yung pag-establish ng mga personal rapport, mga following through on commitments, yung mga yan, yung being punctual. So, yan. So, once na yung trust is na-establish na, of course, it helps in smoothing many difficult bends. So, yung conflict management is an important skill para sa mga project manager. Okay? So, yan. So, while communicating with the stakeholders, yung kailangan yung project manager is ma-practice niya yung active na listening, or dapat maging good listener siya. So, they must not assume that they have all the answers. Instead, is they should spend some time to understand yung mga issues and yung mga stakeholders point of views nila. So this alone can go a long way in smoothing ruffled feathers and building constructive relationships or magandang samahan, especially sa mga stakeholders. Okay? So kailangan yung mga when we say interpersonal skills din is kailangan yung project managers natin is alam niyang mag-convert mag-convert that into how do you call that one? Yung project manager is know how to convert, or you must know how to convert that into a positive energy in its favor. Next is you have the managerial skills. So, ito naman is tinutulungan niya din ito especially sa pag-accomplish ng mga project objectives. So, yung project manager is kailangan maging must be able to kailangan mag-build ng consensus among doon sa group. So, while absolute uniformity may not always be possible. So, yung mga project manager is kailangan gumamit ng technique para ma-ensure yung widespread discussion and arrive at the path that the group can buy into. So, yan. So, next is we have the project. So, those are the, how do you call that one? Skills in project management. So, you have the interpersonal skills and yung mga managerial skills. Okay? So, next is we have the project stakeholder management processes. So, there are 4 processes in a project stakeholder management. So, Yung first process is identify stakeholders, which is yun perform yung during the initiating process group. So yung second process is yung plan stakeholder management natin, which is yun performed during yung during yung planning process group. So yung third naman is you have the manage stakeholder engagement. So which is performed during the yun executing process group. So the fourth is you have the control stakeholder engagement, so which is performed naman during the monitoring and controlling group process. So you have here the identify stakeholders. So when we say identify stakeholders is ito is a process o yun pag-identify ng mga tao, ng group, ng organization that could pwedeng affect or be affected doon sa my decision or doon sa activity or doon sa outcome ng project. So clearly, yung process ng stakeholders management is nagsisimula lagi doon sa pag-identify ng yung nagsisimula lagi sa identification of the stakeholders in a project. Okay? So yan. So the first input is yung project Carter natin, if you are familiar with that one. So yung Carter natin is nagpo-provide siya ng high-level overview doon sa my project natin. Or its customers and very useful document din siya para matulungan tayo to start with the stakeholder identification. Okay? So yan. So next is we have the plan stakeholder management. So after na ma-identify natin yung stakeholders, so kailangan na yun, kailangan ma-determine din natin how you will manage yung stakeholders doon sa project. So yung plan stakeholder management process is of course involved yung analyzing kung ano yung mga kailangan, kung ano yung mga interest or mga gusto, and even the potential impact that the stakeholders might have on the success of the project. Okay? So yun. So yung tools and techniques for this process is involved yung various analytical techniques which is which are needed doon sa pag-analyze ng various alternative strategies natin for dealing with the stakeholder. Okay? So yan. So next is we have the manage stakeholder engagement. So in the manage stakeholder engagement process, pwede kang maglagay ng plans into action. So ito is tinutulungan ka din para ma-ensure na yung engagement and yung contribution ng mga stakeholders are minimized and their resistance to the project is ma-minimize. Okay? So yan. So yung mga stakeholder management plan is very important input yun. Kasi nga, it is the master plan. Ito yung pinaka-master plan natin, which is tinutulungan tayo para or maging guide ito doon sa action which is related to stakeholder management. Okay, so yan. So next is you have, this is the last one. Control stakeholder engagement. Okay, so for the control stakeholder engagement is ano naman ito? So as in any monitoring and controlling process, yung control stakeholder management process natin is of course involved yung monitoring the state of the various stakeholder relationship and taking specific actions para ma-enhance yung engagement doon sa mga iba't ibang stakeholders. So yung input to this process are yung project management plan. So the issue logs, which was generated in the previous process. So data related to the work being performed on the project and yung mga various other plan documents. So which is kailangan para ma-share ito doon sa mga stakeholders. Okay, so yan. So those are the project stakeholder management processes. Okay, so that is for our lesson or discussion for week 8, and I hope everyone understand our topic for today. So if you have a question or point of clarification, please do not hesitate to ask me through my personal messenger or dun sa group chat natin. Okay, so yan. So I hope naintindihan ninyo, and kagaya ng sinabi ko, pag may mga questions kayo, pwede i-chat nyo lang ako. Okay? So yan. So for your requirements, yan. So for your requirements,
So for activity number 1, so take note lang guys that for your answer, you will going to use a yellow sheet paper. So if possible is i-avoid natin yung mga erasures. So for activity number 1, so you will going to answer the following question into 10 to 15 sentences. For question number 1, differentiate interpersonal skills and from managerial skills. So that is based from your own idea ha. Hindi po yung galing sa definition na binigay ko. Next is how will stakeholders work together to achieve the goal? What will be the various roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders? And for number 3, explain to skills na kailangan ng kailangan para ma-manage ang stakeholder or needed to manage stakeholders. And for your activity number 2 is, hindi ko na nilagay yung mga tanong ha, kasi that is multiple choices. So, read the questions carefully and choose the best answer. So, you will going only to write the correct answer or the letter of the correct answer. Okay, so that is for your activity or requirements for week 8. And I hope, or I will be expecting you to submit your requirements anytime this week. So again, thank you so much for listening and I hope makinig pa kayo sa mga susunod pa na mga supplemental videos or recorded videos. Thank you so much for your time and keep your immune system strong. Always wear your face mask or your face shield when you go out. Mag-sanitize kayo ng mga kamay ninyo, maghugas kayo ng mga kamay ninyo, kumain kayo ng mga masusustansya, and then maintain social distancing, especially sa mga crowded places. Ayan. Ingatan yung mga sarili nyo. So, thank you and God bless us all.